The Times is a British daily national newspaper based in London. It began in 1785 under the title The Daily Universal Register and became The Times on 1 January 1788. The Times and its sister paper The Sunday Times are published by Times Newspapers, since 1981 a subsidiary of News UK, itself wholly owned by the News Corp group headed by Rupert Murdoch. The Times and The Sunday Times do not share editorial staff, were founded independently and have only had common ownership since 1967. In 1959, historian of journalism Alan Nevins analysed the importance of The Times in shaping London's elite views of events. For much more than a century, The Times has been an integral and important part of the political structure of Great Britain. Its news and its editorial comment have in general been carefully coordinated, and have at most times been handled with an earnest sense of responsibility. While the paper has admitted some trivia to its columns, its whole emphasis has been on important public affairs treated with an eye to the best interests of Britain. To guide this treatment, the editors have for long periods been in close touch with 10 Downing Street. The Times is the first newspaper to have borne that name, lending it to numerous other papers around the world, including the Times of India, the Straits Times, the New York Times, the Irish Times, the Cape Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Seattle Times, the Manila Times, the Daily Times, the Canberra Times, and the Times. In these countries and others, the newspaper is often referred to as the London Times or the Times of London. The Times is the originator of the widely used Times Roman typeface, originally developed by Stanley Morrison of the Times in collaboration with the Monotype Corporation for its legibility and low-tech printing. In November 2006, the Times began printing headlines in a new font, Times Modern. The Times was printed in broadsheet format for 219 years, but switched to compact size in 2004 in an attempt to appeal more to younger readers and commuters using public transport. The Sunday Times remains a broadsheet, though traditionally a moderate newspaper and sometimes a supporter of the Conservative Party. It supported the Labour Party in the 2001 and 2005 general elections. In 2004, according to Mori, the voting intentions of its readership were 40% for the Conservative Party, 29% for the Liberal Democrats, and 26% for Labour. The Times had an average daily circulation of 394,448 in March 2014. In the same period, the Sunday Times had an average daily circulation of 839,077. An American edition of the Times has been published since 6 June 2006. It has been heavily used by scholars and researchers because of its widespread availability in libraries and its detailed index. A complete historical file of the digitized paper is online from Gage Publisher. History 1785 to 1890. The Times was founded by publisher John Walter on 1 January 1785 as the Daily Universal Register, with Walter in the role of editor. Walter had lost his job by the end of 1784 after the insurance company where he was working went bankrupt because of the complaints of a Jamaican hurricane. Being unemployed, Walter decided to set a new business up. It was in that time when Henry Johnson invented the logography, a new typography that was faster and more precise. Walter bought the logography's patent, and to use it, he decided to open a printing house, where he would daily produce an advertising sheet. The first publication of the newspaper, the Daily Universal Register in Great Britain, was 1 January 1785. Unhappy because people always omitted the word universal, Elias changed the title after 940 editions on 1 January 1788 to The Times. In 1803, Walter handed ownership and editorship to his son of the same name. Walter Sr. had spent 16 months in Newgate prison for libel printed in The Times, but his pioneering efforts to obtain continental news especially from France, helped build the paper's reputation among policymakers and financiers. The Times used contributions from significant figures in the fields of politics, science, literature, and the arts to build its reputation. For much of its early life, the profits of the Times were very large and the competition minimal, so it could pay far better than its rivals for information or writers. Beginning in 1814, the paper was printed on the new steam-driven cylinder press developed by Friedrich Koenig. In 1815, the Times had a circulation of 5,000. Thomas Barnes was appointed general editor in 1817. In the same year, the paper's printer James Lawson died and passed the business on to his son John Joseph Lawson. Under the editorship of Barnes and his successor in 1841, John Thaddeus Delane, the influence of the Times rose to great heights, especially in politics and amongst the City of London. Peter Fraser and Edward Sterling were two noted journalists, and gained for the Times the pompous, satirical nickname, the Thunderer. The increased circulation and influence of the paper was based in part to its early adoption of the steam-driven rotary printing press. Distribution via steam trains to rapidly growing concentrations of urban populations helped ensure the profitability of the paper and its growing influence. The Times was the first newspaper to send war correspondents to cover particular conflicts. W.H. Russell, the paper's correspondent with the army in the Crimean War, was immensely influential with his dispatches back to England. In other events of the 19th century, the Times opposed the repeal of the Corn Laws until the number of demonstrations convinced the editorial board otherwise, and only reluctantly supported aid to victims of the Irish potato famine. It enthusiastically supported the Great Reform Bill of 1832, which reduced corruption and increased the electorate from 400,000 people to 800,000 people. During the American Civil War, the Times represented the view of the wealthy classes, favoring the secessionists, but it was not a supporter of slavery. The third John Walter, the founder's grandson, succeeded his father in 1847. The paper continued as more or less independent, but from the 1850s the Times was beginning to suffer from the rise in competition from the penny press, notably the Daily Telegraph and the Morning Post. During the 19th century, it was not infrequent for the Foreign Office to approach the Times and ask for continental intelligence, which was often superior to that conveyed by official sources. 1890 to 1981, the Times faced financial extinction in 1890 under Arthur Fraser Walter, but it was rescued by an energetic editor, Charles Frederick Moberly Bell. During his tenure, the Times became associated with selling the Encyclopaedia Britannica using aggressive American marketing methods introduced by Horace Everett Hooper and his advertising executive, Henry Haxton. Due to legal fights between the Britannica's two owners, Hooper and Walter Montgomery Jackson, the Times severed its connection in 1908 and was bought by pioneering newspaper magnate, Alfred Harmsworth, later Lord Northcliffe. In editorials published on 29 and 31 July 1914, Wickham Steed, the Times' chief editor, argued that the British Empire should enter World War I. On 8 May 1920, also under the editorship of Steed, the Times in an editorial endorsed the anti-Semitic fabrication The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion as a genuine document, and called Jews the world's greatest danger. In the leader entitled The Jewish Peril, a disturbing pamphlet, Call for Inquiry, Steed wrote about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. What are these protocols? Are they authentic? If so, what malevolent assembly concocted these plans and gloated over their exposition? Are they forgery? If so, whence comes the uncanny note of prophecy in part fulfilled, in part so far gone in the way of fulfillment? The following year, when Philip Graves, the Constantinople correspondent of the Times, exposed the Protocols as a forgery, The Times retracted the editorial of the previous year. In 1922, John J. Carr Astor, son of the first Viscount Astor, bought the Times from the Northcliffe estate. The paper gained a measure of notoriety in the 1930s with its advocacy of German appeasement. Then-editor Geoffrey Dawson was closely allied with those in the government who practiced appeasement. Most notably, Neville Chamberlain. Kim Philby, a Soviet double agent, was a correspondent for the newspaper in Spain during the Spanish Civil War of the late 1930s. Philby was admired for his courage in obtaining high-quality reporting from the front lines of the bloody conflict. He later joined MI6 during World War II, was promoted into senior positions after the war ended, then eventually defected to the Soviet Union in 1963. Between 1941 and 1946, the left-wing British historian E.H. Carr was assistant editor. Carr was well known for the strongly pro-Soviet tone of his editorials. In December 1944, when fighting broke out in Athens between the Greek Communist ELAS and the British Army, Carr in a Times editorial sided with the Communists, leading Winston Churchill to condemn him and that leader in a speech to the House of Commons. As a result of Carr's editorial, the Times became popularly known during that stage of World War II as the Threepenny Daily Worker. On 3 May 1966 it resumed printing news on the front page. Previously the front page featured small advertisements, usually of interest to the moneyed classes in British society. In 1967, members of the Astor family sold the paper to Canadian publishing magnate Roy Thomson. His Thomson Corporation brought it under the same ownership as the Sunday Times to form Times Newspapers Limited. An industrial dispute prompted the management to shut the paper for nearly a year. The Thomson Corporation management were struggling to run the business due to the 1979 energy crisis and union demands. Management were left with no choice but to find a buyer who was in a position to guarantee the survival of both titles, and also one who had the resources and was committed to funding the introduction of modern printing methods. Several suitors appeared, including Robert Maxwell, Tiny Rowland and Lord Rothermere. However, only one buyer was in a position to meet the full Thomson remit: Australian media magnate Rupert Murdoch. Robert Holmes à Court, another Australian magnate, had previously tried to buy the Times in 1981 to present in 1981. The Times and the Sunday Times were bought from Thomson by Rupert Murdoch's News International. The acquisition followed 3 weeks of intensive bargaining with the unions by company negotiators, John Collier and Bill O'Neill. After 14 years as editor, William Rees-Mogg resigned the post upon completion of the change of ownership. Murdoch began to make his mark on the paper by appointing Harold Evans as his replacement. One of his most important changes was the introduction of new technology and efficiency measures. In March-May 1982, following agreement with print unions, the hot metal linotype printing process used to print the Times since the 19th century was phased out and replaced by computer input and photo composition. This allowed print room staff at the Times and the Sunday Times to be reduced by half. However, direct input of text by journalists was still not achieved, and this was to remain an interim measure until the Wapping dispute of 1986, when the Times moved from new Printing House Square in Gray's Inn Road to new offices in Wapping. Robert Fisk, 7 times British International Journalist of the Year, resigned as foreign correspondent in 1988 over what he saw as political censorship of his article on the shooting down of Iran Air Flight 655 in July 1988. He wrote in detail about his reasons for resigning from the paper due to meddling with his stories, and the paper's pro-Israel stance. In June 1990, the Times ceased its policy of using courtesy titles for living persons before full names on first reference, but it continues to use them before surnames on subsequent references. The more formal style is now confined to the Court and Social page, though Ms. is now acceptable in that section, as well as before surnames in news sections. In November 2003, News International began producing the newspaper in both broadsheet and tabloid sizes. On 13 September 2004, the weekday broadsheet was withdrawn from sale in Northern Ireland. Since 1 November 2004, the paper has been printed solely in tabloid format. On 6 June 2005, The Times redesigned its letters page, dropping the practice of printing correspondents' full postal addresses. Published letters were long regarded as one of the paper's key constituents. Author, solicitor David Green of Castle Morris, Pembrokeshire, has had more letters published on the main letters page than any other known contributor, 158 by 31 January 2008. According to its leading article, From Our Own Correspondence, removal of full postal addresses was in order to fit more letters onto the page. In a 2007 meeting with the House of Lords Select Committee on Communications, which was investigating media ownership and the news, Murdoch stated that the law and the independent board prevented him from exercising editorial control. In May 2008, printing of The Times switched from Wapping to new plants at Broxbourne on the outskirts of London, and Merseyside in Glasgow, enabling the paper to be produced with full colour on every page for the first time. On 26 July 2012, to coincide with the official start of the London 2012 Olympics and the issuing of a series of souvenir front covers, The Times added the suffix of London to its masthead. Content. The Times features news for the first half of the paper. The opinion, comment section begins after the first news section, with world news normally following this. The sports section is at the end of the main paper. The Times' current prices are £1.20 for the daily edition and £1.50 for the Saturday edition. Times 2. The Times' main supplement, every day, is The Times 2, featuring various lifestyle columns. It was discontinued on 1 March 2010 but reintroduced on the 11th of October 2010 after negative feedback. Its regular features include a puzzles section called Mind Games. Its previous incarnation began on 5 September 2005, before which it was called T2 and previously Times 2. Regular features include columns by a different columnist each weekday. There was a column by Marcus du Sautoy each Wednesday, for example. The back pages are devoted to puzzles and contain Sudoku, Killer Sudoku, Kenkan, word polygon puzzles, and a crossword simpler and more concise than the main Times crossword. The supplement contains arts and lifestyle features, TV and radio listings and reviews. The game is included in the newspaper on Mondays, and details all the weekend's football activity. The Scottish edition of the game also includes results and analysis from Scottish Premier League games. Saturday supplements. The Saturday edition of The Times contains a variety of supplements. These supplements were relaunched in January 2009 as Sport, Weekend, Saturday Review, The Times Magazine, and Playlist. Saturday Review is the first regular supplement published in broadsheet format since the paper switched to a compact size in 2004. At the beginning of summer 2011, Saturday Review switched to the tabloid format. The Times Magazine features columns touching on various subjects such as celebrities, fashion and beauty, food and drink, homes and gardens, or simply writers' anecdotes. Notable contributors include Giles Coren, Food and Drink Writer of the Year in 2005. Online presence. The Times and the Sunday Times have had an online presence since March 1999, originally at the-times.co.uk and sunday-times.co.uk, and later at timesonline.co.uk. There are now two websites. The Times.co.uk is aimed at daily readers, and the SundayTimes.co.uk site at providing weekly magazine-like content. There are also iPad and Android editions of both newspapers. Since July 2010, News UK has required readers who do not subscribe to the print edition to pay £2 per week to read The Times and The Sunday Times online. The Times digital archive is freely accessible via Gale databases to readers affiliated with subscribing academic, public, and school libraries. Visits to the websites have decreased by 87% since the paywall was introduced, from 21 million unique users per month to 2.7 million. In April 2009, the Times online site had a readership of 750,000 readers per day. As of October 2011, there were around 111,000 subscribers to the Times digital products. Ownership. The Times has had the following 8 owners since its foundation in 1785. 1785 to 1803 John Walter, 1803 to 1847 John Walter II, 1847 to 1894 John Walter III, 1894 to 1908 Arthur Fraser Walter, 1908 to 1922 Lord Northcliffe, 1922 to 1966 Astor family, 1966 to 1981 Roy Thomson, 1981 to present News UK. John Walter, the founder of the Times. John Walter II, John Walter III, Lord Northcliffe, John Jacob Astor v. Gavin Astor, Roy Thomson, Rupert Murdoch. Readership. At the time of Harold Evans's appointment as editor in 1981, the Times had an average daily sale of 282,000 copies in comparison to the 1.4 million daily sales of its traditional rival the Daily Telegraph. By November 2005, the Times sold an average of 691,283 copies per day, the second highest of any British-quality newspaper, and the highest in terms of full-rate sales. By March 2014, average daily circulation of the Times had fallen to 394,448 copies, compared to the Daily Telegraph's 523,048, with the two retaining respectively the second highest and highest circulations among British-quality newspapers. In contrast, The Sun, the highest-selling tabloid daily newspaper in the United Kingdom, sold an average of 2,069,809 copies in March 2014, and the Daily Mail, the highest-selling middle-market British daily newspaper, sold an average of 1,708,006 copies in the period. The Sunday Times has a significantly higher circulation than the Times, and sometimes outsells the Sunday Telegraph. As of January 2013, the Times has a circulation of 399,339 and the Sunday Times of 885,612. In a 2009 national readership survey, the Times was found to have the highest number of ABC 125 to 44 readers and the largest numbers of readers in London of any of the quality papers.